Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this online talk event when you may have something else to do, such as Christmas shopping. My name is Junko Takekawa, Senior Arts Program Officer of Japan Foundation London. This talk event is part of the London International Animation Festival 2021 and then is organized in collaboration with the festival. For today's talk, we are very pleased to invite two Japanese animation creators who are represented at the festival this year. They are Sarina Nihei and then Atsushi Wada. First speaker to introduce is Miss Sarina Nihei. As the world is getting smaller and the people live and study, work anywhere, which is now difficult because of the COVID. It is not surprising that some Japanese animation creators are inspired by non-Japanese works and decided to study abroad. Ms. Nihei is one of them. Inspired by Estonian animation, she studies at London's Royal College of Art. Her graduation work, Small People with Hats, won a prize and was screened all over the world. Yesterday's screening at the London International Animation Festival, where her work was included, was sold out. And then I hope some of you were lucky enough to catch her work. Another speaker is Mr. Atsushi Wada. Like Miss Nihei, he was also in the UK for a year in the past. By the way, one of his related Japanese websites mentioned him as being world's most pleasant animation creator. This is rough translation, and I'm not really sure exactly what it means, even in Japanese, whether he's most pleasant or his work is pleasant. Seeing his flat drawings, funny but enigmatic storylines and the characters, I wouldn't say his works are simply pleasant, in my opinion, although he seems to be a very pleasant guy. But either way, award-winning animation creator Mr. Wada is internationally highly respected, and I look forward to hearing some behind the scenes about his works today. After a brief presentation both Nihei-san and Wada-san, there will be a discussion led by Alex Dudok de Wit. Some of you may remember Alex from our previous event on Grave of the Fireflies, for which he presented his newly published book on the work, and then Isao Takahata. As a journalist specializing in animation, I'm sure he will ask them interesting questions today. Thank you all for your time. Next, housekeeping matters. Today's event will be recorded. As we are using a webinar function, your names will not be viewable by other attendees. However, I strongly recommend you to keep your audio and video muted throughout just in case. If please use the Q&A function to send in your question at any time. You can see Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Remember, the attendee's question may be seen by everyone else so that you can upvote a particular question placed by another person which you would like answered. Or if it's the same as yours, simply click the thumb up icon next to the question you wish to upvote. Unfortunately, due to time restrictions, we may not be able to pick up all of the questions you ask, so my apologies in advance. Lastly, as always, we will send you an online questionnaire, so please spare a short moment to complete it for our future event. That's all from me. Now we should begin. I'd like to first introduce Nihei-san to come onto the screen to present her work. Nihei-san, お願いします。
Hello, my name is Sarina Nihei. I'm an independent animation director from Japan, currently living in Sapporo, Hokkaido. So I'm going to talk about my film and my background today. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, so this is my work. I specialize in hand-drawn animation using acrylic paints and black ink. or black pen. And basically I make short films and music videos. And so I studied graphic design at Tama Art University in Tokyo, and where I discovered some animators, independent animators, like no, at the time before I discovered some animations, I wanted to be a graphic designer like Tommy Ungular, who was Alsatian graphic designer and author of children's books, who used some kind of acrylic-like paints and basically dip pen. And I loved his style and his colors, and his illustration style is kind of beautiful, but at the same time, it's got a kind of black humor and kind of, I don't know, dark themes. So I was attracted to this kind of hand-drawn style and kind of having some dark elements in the work. And around that time, I discovered Atsushi Wada's work, which was featured in the TV program that was aired around that time when I was like in the second year in my uni. And in that program, they kind of focused on kind of upcoming independent animators. And I was really fascinated by all kinds of like really like unique styles that independent animators used. And at around that time, I also discovered Preet Parun's work, who is, as many of you might know, he's a legendary Estonian animation director. And I loved his films because his work is so absurd, and his illustration style is so unique, and it looks like a really kind of ugly, but at the same time, I don't know, it's so fascinating. And his animation style is kind of, you know, it's hard to understand when you watch for the first time, but for me, like always when I watch his film, I find some kind of other like new elements in his work, and that's why I wanted to like I gradually decided to seek my career in animation. So I went to the Royal College of Art in London, where I studied animation. And because I loved many graduates from the I loved some graduates from the RCA, like Jonathan Hodgson, Petra Fleeman, Ron Rake, Stuart Hilton. So their styles are so unique and, you know, kind of really like handcrafted styles. And yeah, I was, as I said, I was fascinated by like Tommy Ungular's work. So I kind of wanted to make something similar to their styles, but at the same time, I wanted to make something unique. So I made a bunch of films at the RCA using kind of same technique, like using acrylic paints and kind of ink. And as a graduation film from the RCA, I made a film called Small People with Hats, which was the story is about small people wearing hats who kind of end up getting killed in an absurd situation. So yeah, this is part of the storyboard of the film. Actually, I hate storyboarding, but I force myself to do it because I realized storyboarding is very useful to meet the deadline. And I don't do animatic, but storyboarding is kind of one of the most important processes in my work. So after graduation from the RCA, I went back to Tokyo and I went to some job interviews, but I got rejected by everything except for one animation studio where I worked on one project, for a big project, but it was really difficult, and so I quit like after 3 months. But so I kept applying for a job both in like international animation studios and in Japan, but I got rejected, kept getting rejected, and I guess I didn't know how to like sell myself, and like only thing around at that time, only thing I wanted to do was making my own film, and gradually I got commissions, and fortunately so I got commissioned by Random Acts, which is a TV program by Channel 4 in the UK. So I made a film called Rabbit's Blood, which is a story about the people who are two groups where people wear black clothes and people wear red clothes, and something surreal happens. And so when I think about when I come up with new ideas of my film, I write down like everything in my sketchbook, and kind of thinking about how the characters interact with each other and decide what's going to happen in the film, and both writing down the words and drawing at the same time. And this film was around 5 minutes, under 5 minutes, but I had like less than 3 months to make it, which is so hard for me. I mean, I guess like it's really hard to make around 5 minutes film for 2.5 months for like any animators. And I got sick after making this film, and but I recovered gradually, and so doing some commissioned work and going to the film festivals and thinking about like new film. And yeah, I started making a new film, which I finished early 2020, just before the COVID hit. The film is called Polka Dot Boy, which is a story about a boy who's got polka dot disease on his arms since he can remember. And this story is, he is suffering from the disease, physically, mentally and physically. And this story is kind of inspired by a incident happened in Japan. They are terrorist attacks happened in Nagano Prefecture and in subway stations in Tokyo in the 1990s. And so that was acted by Japanese cult called Om Shinrikyo. So yeah, that was, as I grew up, I remember this incident quite clearly, and I was really terrified. And so in 2018, 13 perpetrators were executed, and that was, I remember that kind of fears in my, as a kid, and then I wanted to make something about cult related kind of absurd stories. And so I started thinking about this story and what's going to happen in the story, characters, writing down the words and drawing at the same time. And I kind of, this looks like really messy, but this process is like as important as storyboarding. And I made this film in Denmark in a part of like artist in residence program called Open Workshop. So I spent 9 months in total, and I did the whole production in Viborg, which is a really small town in Denmark. So as a production process, I animate everything on paper, and I start animating by pencil first, and then checking the movements by line test set up next to me. And at the time I had this shooting set up next to me in Denmark. So checking the movements in Dragon Frame, and then if the movements are okay, I redraw it by a ballpoint pen on the same layer, and then after that start painting by acrylic paints and drawing out, like laying pieces of papers in my desk. And yeah, that was kind of but in Open Workshop, it was really fun. There are people around me who are like doing their own stuff. They are illustrators and animators. And it was the first time after the graduation from the RCA to have people around me when I was working on my film, which was great. On the weekend, we had like a potluck parties and drinking like early morning. And so yeah, that was really cool to have like enough working space and stuff, because when I was in Tokyo, I was always working by my own on my own in my tiny apartment. So that was pretty like perfect place to work. So yeah, this is actually my parents' house. I kind of tried to pile up the paper on the right. Those frames are all polka dot boys animation frames, and on the left that was commissioned work I was working on in 2020 after like during the COVID time. So I was quite really not productive at all. But this is what I do. So yeah. Thanks for listening. I'm gonna hand it over to Atsushi Wada. Wada-san, お願いします。
はい。よろしくお願いします。和田敦と言います。
Thank you. I'm Atsushi Wada.
二平さんのプレゼンテーション、面白かったです。スケッチブックがもうちょっと長い時間見たかったなっていう感じですね。
That was a great presentation, Nihei-san. I would have liked a little bit longer to peruse your sketchbooks.
はい。じゃあ今から僕も、作品のことなどお話できればと思います。
Let me talk a bit about my work now then.
はい。今回作品のプレゼンテーションを依頼されて、で、何をお話ししようかなと思ったんですけども、その時に、自分がアニメーションを始めたのはなぜだったかなというところを考えてみました。
When I was asked to give a presentation of my work, I wondered what I should talk about. And then I thought, well, maybe I should start with why I wanted to become an animator in the first place.
はい。で、これはアニメーションを始める前からですけど、僕自身、ちょっと奇妙なものだったり、異様なものとか、あと不思議なもの、謎が多いものが昔から好きで興味惹かれていました。
I've always been interested from well before I started animating in things that are bizarre, strange, unusual, a bit mysterious.
で、そういうものとか場所が好きで、そういうのに出会うと写真に撮りたくなったり、今見てもらってるのはそういうものなんですけど、自分の手元に置いておきたくなったりしています。
I like those kinds of things and those kinds of places, and when I find one, I want to take a photograph or take it home with me. These are some of those examples.
で、なんでそういうものに惹かれるのかなって考えたときに、全体的な傾向として、ゆるさだったり、ゆるかったり、隙がある感じっていうんですかね。そういうものが傾向としてあるかなと思います。
And I try to think about why I'm attracted to these things, and the trend seems to be that they're a bit off, they're a bit maybe loose, floppy, there are gaps.
で、じゃあなんでそのゆるさとか隙のある感じが好きなのかなと思ったら、多分それは余白があるっていうことなのかなと思ったわけです。
And so I thought, why does that appeal to me? And I think it's the sense of there being a blank space.
その余白っていうのが受け手の想像力を喚起させたり考えさせることにつながってるんじゃないかなと思うんですね。
And I think that blank stimulates the imagination of the person looking at whatever it is and invites us to think.
そういうその余白があることで受け手が考えたり想像したり補完したりして、そのものを味わい深くさせているような気がしているんです。
And so the blank that's there encourages the viewer to think and to imagine and to fill in the gap.
で、なので、そういう、ところに惹かれてるんだなと思うとともに、自分が、何か作るとき、表現するときにも、そういうものを、なんていうか、独特な空気感みたいなものを出せたらいいなと思って、アニメーションを始めました。
And that was what I kind of wanted to be able to replicate when creating things for myself. And that was the kind of unique atmosphere that I was aiming for when I started animating.
はい。なので、それが、そういうものを出したくてアニメーションを始めたんですけど、じゃあ今度はその独特の空気感を出したいっていう思いと、そのアニメーションという手法がどうつながっているのかっていうのをお話したいと思います。
So then the question was how to connect this unique atmosphere that I was aiming to create with the techniques of animation.
その僕自身、これはアニメーション始める前から映像自体には興味があって、それは日本のお笑い芸人でダウンタウンっていうのがいて、でそのコンビなんですけど、そのうちの松本人志という人の作るコントが昔から好きだったんですね。
Even before I got into animation, I liked film. And there's this Japanese comic duo called Downtown. And I really like the comic skits that Hitoshi Matsumoto comes up with.
そうで、その彼、特に彼が作った、ビジュアルバムっていうコント集があるんですけど、それは20年前ぐらいに出たものなんですけど、今も僕にとっての指針となるような、ものになっています。
There's a collection of those skits called Visual Album. It's about 20 years old now, but it's still kind of my signpost.
で、その、彼が作るコントから醸し出される、それこそまさに独特の空気感みたいなものがとても好きで、憧れも持って見ていました。
And again, there's a really unique atmosphere to his skits that I really respected.
僕がそういう、空気感を出したいって思ったことと、じゃあそれをどういうふうに表現するかっていう時に、すぐに映像っていうのにつながったのは、その松本人志という人がいたからかなと思います。
And I think that is one reason why when I was wondering how to create something that could replicate this kind of atmosphere, I turned to film.
で、実写でもライブアクションでもよかったんですけど、ただ実写の場合、どうしても人と関わりながら作っていかないと、チームでね、作っていかないといけないんですけど、僕が性格的に誰かと何かを作るっていうのはちょっと嫌で、それで実写ではなく、アニメーションを、作り始めました。
And I could have done that through live action film, but personality-wise, I'm not someone who really likes to work with other people. And I knew that for live action, I would need to work in a team, which is why I decided on animation.
で、僕がアニメーション作り始めたのが2002年頃なんですけど、その当時は、僕自身自分のパソコンは持ってなかったんですけど、その当時大学生で、大学で自由に使える環境にはあったので、そこで、もう一人で勝手に、独学でアニメーションっていうものを作り始めました。
I started creating animation in 2002. I didn't have my own computer at the time, but I was a student at university and there were computers that I could use anytime. So I started to teach myself how to create animation.
そう、なので、さっき言ったみたいに独特の空気感を 出したいっていうことだけが目的だったので、そのアニメーションの技術とか知識とかノウハウみたいなことを全く身につけないまま始めたし、自分自身もそういうものを身につけたいという向上心があまりなかったんですね。
As I say, my only aim when I started was to create this unique atmosphere. So I had no knowledge, I had no technique, I had no expertise in animation when I started, and I didn't really have any ambitions to acquire any of those either.
なので、そういう、特に技術なんかは、伸びが本当に悪くて、なかなか、なんていうんですね、今見ても、作品を見返しても、下手だなと思うんですけど、それはね、それとして、その自分のやりたいことを自分の思ったような手法で自由に作れた、そういう環境があったっていうのは、自分にとっては良かったかなと思っています。
So I didn't really make much progress in terms of technique, and I look back at my work then now, and I recognize that it is pretty poor quality. But I think it was good that I was in that environment where I was able to do what I wanted to do in the way that I was able to do it.
はい。じゃあ、ここからは、実際に具体的にどういうふうに作品を作っているかっていうのを少しお話しできるかなと思います。
So let me talk a little bit now about how I actually go about creating an animation.
今見てもらっているのが、2005年に作った花の日というものですけども、これは僕にとって、ちょっとタイミングポイントになったような作品なので、これをもとに紹介したい、説明したいなと思います。
We'll look at this animation, Day of Nose. I made it in 2005, and it was a bit of a turning point for me.
2005年で僕が作り始めたのは2002年なので、その3年ぐらいはもうその独特の空気感っていうのを出すっていうのを目的に、自分が思うように勝手に作ってたんですけど、何かもう少し作品と自分自身の距離を縮められないかなっていうふうに思っていたんです。
So this was made in 2005, and I'd started animating in 2002. And over those 3 years, my only aim had been to try to create this atmosphere in whatever way I could. But at this point, I started to wonder if I couldn't bring my work and myself closer together somehow.
なんとなくね、自分のものになってないっていう感じがあって、じゃあそれをどうしたらそうなるのかっていうふうに考えたときに、ちょっと安易ですけど、自分の癖とかフェチみたいなものを前面に押し出せば、よりその作品が自分のものになるんじゃないかと思って作った作品がこれです。
I'd always felt like my work wasn't really me somehow, and I wondered how to make it more me. And what I thought I should do was to bring in more of my own habits, my own fetishes, and bring those to the fore, and that would make it feel more like my own work. And that's what I tried to do with Day of Nose.
で、僕は昔から柔らかそうなものに鼻をこすりつけるのが好きだったので、そういう癖があったので、それをもうもろに作品に出してみようと思いました。
すいません、ちょっと聞き取れませんでした。何をするのが好きだったんですか？
柔らかそうなものに鼻をこすりつけるのが好きだったので、それを前面に出した作品にしました。
So I'd always liked squidging things that look soft. So that was something that I wanted to bring to the fore in this animation.
で、これ以降、これやってみて、なんとなく自分の中で手応えみたいなのがあって、これ以降はその作品を作るときにまず自分の中の気持ちのいい動きっていうのは何だろうというところから、作品制作を始めています。
I tried it with this film and it seemed like it might be a good solution. And so from here on, I started to always consider what kind of movement felt comfortable and pleasant to me.
で、今見てもらってるのもその一つなんですけど、これを作った時は、自分の中で子供がジタバタする動きが気持ちいいだろうと、自分が描きたいと思っていて、だからまずそれを想像するんですね。それを、実際描いてみる。
This is another example of that. When I made this, I was thinking about how a child sort of rolling around seemed like a very pleasant kind of movement. And that's what I tried to put into the film.
で、その段階では、ただ子供がジタバタするっていう、一つのアクションとか、一つのシチュエーションだけなんですけども、じゃあそこからどういう展開をすれば、面白いかなとか、どういうふうにつながっていけば作品になるかなっていうのを考えながら、構成をしていきます。
So initially I just had this idea of a child wriggling around. And then I started to think about what could be the situation that would allow me to animate that and to what the story would be around that. And that's what I started thinking about to create the actual film.
これもカタツムリ、これテーマっていうかカタツムリになるための儀式みたいないうので書いてるんですけど、スタートします。
This one is sort of how to become a snail.
ちょっとスタートしないんで次いきますね。
Doesn't seem to be working, so I'll go on to the next one.
こっちはカタツムリじゃなくてナメクジなんですけど、ナメクジ秘密のペットみたいなね感じで書いています。
This one's a slug, not a snail. It's a kind of a secret slug pet.
でこれもポケットからナメクジがブリンと出てくるのをまず、ポケットでも何でもいいんですけど、ブリンと出てくるものを描きたい。それが気持ちいいだろうと思って、まずは想像します。
And in this one, the movement that I started with, that pleasant, comfortable movement that was the starting point for the animation, was a slug popping out of it ended up being a pocket. It doesn't have to be a pocket, a slug popping out of anywhere.
でそこから、それだけじゃ、物語にならないんで、じゃあそのポケットっていう設定とか、他の人には見られちゃいけないペットっていうような設定を肉付けしていくわけです。
But just that motion of a slug popping out of somewhere isn't a story. So then I came up with the idea of it popping out of a pocket and the fact that it's a pet, a secret pet that you have to keep hidden from other people.
これもそうなんです。ちょっと動きが悪いので、これも犬の中に腹筋する少年っていうシチュエーションが浮かんだので、まずはそこからスタートっていう感じ。
With this one, my start point was the motion of doing a sit-up, a boy doing a sit-up into a dog.
でこれちなみにここから派生してひたすら腹筋するっていうゲームを去年出したんで、皆さんよかったら買ってください。
This one actually developed into a video game, which was released last year. It's a video game where you just do sit-ups. So please go ahead and buy the game.
My Exercise と言います。
It's called My Exercise.
はい。こんな感じで作品を作っていて、で、最初に説明したその独特の空気感っていうのは、もう当初から今に至るまでずっと変わらない自分の核みたいなものになっています。
So that's my method for creating animation. And as I say, the atmosphere, that unique atmosphere that I've been trying to create hasn't changed from the early days right the way through to now.
で、そこにその気持ちのいい動きっていうものをこう加えることで、その気持ちのいい動きと独特の空気感っていうので、作品をどんどんこう構成していくっていうような作り方で、今もずっと作り続けています。
And then to that, I've added this idea of pleasant, comfortable movement that is the starting point for each of my animations and gives me this structure.
以上でプレゼンテーション終わります。
And that's the end of my presentation.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex, and I'm going to be moderating the Q&A that we're moving on to now. I just want to start by, again, thanking Wada-san and Nihei-san for these two fascinating mini masterclasses, and also to Bethan for translating Wada-san's. And hello, everyone out there in cyberspace. I hope you enjoyed that too. And as Junko said at the beginning, if you have any questions for the panelists, then please do drop them into the Q&A box, not the chat box, but the Q&A box. And I'll be keeping an eye on that as we go. But I'll start with a few questions of my own. So, Wada-san, Nihei-san, it's great to speak to you both and great to speak to you together, because I've always felt that your two sets of films have a lot in common. So I think so it's nice to have you here in the same room. Same virtual room. I'd like to start by asking you about how you develop the stories for your films. The stories in your films tend to be quite ambiguous and they don't use dialogue. We saw in your presentations that there's a very strong visual element at the beginning of your projects. And we saw in Nihei-san's presentation that she has you combine kind of writing, doodling with images at the beginning. Do you go further than that and write scripts for your films? And if not, then what do you bring to producers or financiers at the beginning of a project to show them what it's about? I think we can start maybe with Nihei-san.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I haven't really worked with producers from the early age of the production, so I haven't really shown kind of script or anything. But I was writing a sort of script when I was making Polka Dot Boy, but it's not like it's like a list of like what's going to happen from the beginning to end kind of stuff. So it's not actually a real script, but yeah, normally I don't write scripts at all.
Wada-san?
もう最初は作り始めの頃は全く書いてなくて、それを見せる必要がなかったからなんですけど、他の人に。最近はそういうプロデューサーとか、例えば助成金を受けるときにその助成金のために書くものが必要だったりするので、そういう意味ではそのために書いてるかなと思います。だから一応スクリプトっていうのがあるにはあります。
Initially, I never wrote a script because there was no need to show it to anybody. But nowadays, I do need to present producers, or if I'm going for funding, then I need to show something. So I do write scripts for that.
Thank you. Something that's very strong in both of your films is the sense of sharp timing. And a lot of the humor and sometimes the suspense comes from this timing. How do you find it? At what point are the soundtracks in place for your films? And then how do you develop the timing? I know, Nihei-san, you said you don't do animatics. What's your approach to editing? Do you do it on your own?
Yeah, I do on my own. But for the sound, I don't use music, and so I always like for my short films, I I've been working with Estonian sound designer Horat Kuus so far, and so he make the sound really quickly. So at the time by the time I show my film, or like I send the sound sheet, I kind of finished the kind of line animation. So yeah, for the editing, I don't know how I don't know, just I animate and I roughly edit. When I'm animating, I roughly edit in Premiere, and yeah.
And Horat Kuus, who does the sound, we should add, did the sound for films by Pritpen, who you were talking about in your presentation, the Estonian animation film.
Exactly.
And the same question for Wada-san, do you do animatics? How do you find that timing in your film?
アニマティクスはあんまり作るのが苦手で、というのは作っちゃったらもう満足しちゃうところがあるので、本番作る気なくしちゃうみたいなところがあって、なのであんまり好きではないんですけど、なのでタイミングっていうことで言うと、もう最初から頭の中である程度はあって、で最終的には編集でもう一コマ単位で調整していくっていう感じになってで作っています。
ごめんなさい。
タイミングですか？もう初めから構想の段階から。
I'm not really good with animatics because once I do something like that, I kind of tend to be happy with it, and I lose the motivation to carry on and to finalize it. In terms of the timing, it's there kind of from the beginning, but I do then sort of mess around with it a bit at the editing stage.
なので二平さんも音楽使ってないみたいに、僕も基本的には使わないんですけど、その分サウンドっていうのがかなり重要になってきて、で僕自身初めは全部一人でやってたんですけど、それはやっぱり気持ちのいい動きには気持ちのいい音がついてくるっていう持論みたいなものがあって、それを自分が一番よく分かってるから自分でつけていたんですけども、最近、ここ数年は滝野さんっていう方がずっとサウンドデザイナーとして入ってくださって、もう大体僕のやりたい感じっていうのは分かってくれているので、その音のクオリティも上げたまま僕のやりたい世界観も出してくれるという割といい関係性が築けているかなと思います。
I don't tend to use music like Nihei-san, but for that reason, the sound is important. Initially, when I was making everything all by myself, I would be responsible for creating the sound as well, and I needed a sound that felt to me like it matched that movement that was the start point of my work, and I was the one who was best placed to know what sounds felt good to me. But for the last few years, I've been working with a sound director called Takino-san, who really understands my sensibility and is able to produce that same worldview through sound that I was aiming for, but at a higher quality. And so we have a really good relationship.
Yeah, it's true that neither of you really use music or dialogue, for that matter, in your personal films, but you've both made commissioned films which do use music. So Nihei-san, in your case, you've made several music videos for different artists, different bands. Wada-san, you've made a film based around the autumn movement of Vivaldi's Four Seasons. So here you suddenly do have music to work with. How did that change your creative process? I assume you had the music to begin with. How do you build a film around that? Nihei-san, we can start with you.
Right, it's completely different, but basically, like whenever I'm commissioned by to make a music video, like people say the client says like you can do whatever you like, and so it's really fun to do, but yeah, it's not as like, it's not my work. I try not to destroy the music, so I don't know, I'm quite, maybe I shouldn't think about that too much, but I try not to use like violence as much as I do in my film, like in my own films. But yeah, making like animating own music is quite fun.
Yeah. And Wada-san, could you speak about your experience making Autumn?
僕はそのビバルディの秋を映像化するっていうプロジェクトでほぼ初めて音楽を使った作品を作ったんですけど、
Turning Vivaldi's Autumn into animation was pretty much the first time I'd used music.
めちゃくちゃ悩みましたね。どうしようかなと思いました。
And it was really challenging, thinking about how to go about it.
だからそのサウンドで、さっき質問のあったタイミング、まさにタイミングをサウンドでこう測ってるところがあって、例えば足音のタタタタタタ、シーン、タタタみたいな、そういう音でリズムを取ってるみたいなところがあるので、音楽が入ると、その感じが全くできなくなって、普段作ってる感じでは作れなかったんですね。
Because the sound has such an impact on the timing, and usually that would create a rhythm in my work. So I might have footsteps, ta, 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 and then silence, and then more footsteps, and that would create the rhythm. But I can't do that if I have to work to the music. So it was quite a different way of working.
だから結局解決はこれだっていうのはあんまり見つからなかったんですけど、その中でいかにその自分の、動きから出るテイストみたいなものを音楽をあんまり崩さないように出せるかっていうのをチャレンジしました。
And I don't think I really found a solution in the end. I think it was just a case of how much I could not damage the music whilst bringing out as much of the flavor of my movement as I could.
そういう意味で一番難しかったかもしれないです、作るの。
I think it was probably the hardest thing I've done.
Did you choose which of the 4 movements of the 4 seasons you were allowed to work with?
いや、僕はその前に春の仕組みっていう作品を作っていたので、当然春が来るだろうなと思ってたんですけど、山村浩二さんから秋をやってくれって言われて、なんか想像してたのとは違ったんですけど、それはそれで考えました。
I kind of expected that they would ask me to do spring because I'd made a film called The Mechanism of Spring, but actually they asked for autumn, so it wasn't what I was expecting, but that was what I ended up doing.
Thanks. I'm going to move to some audience questions, and just to remind people, if you want your question to be submitted, please put it in the Q&A box, not the chat box. Thank you. So we've got a question here for Sarina Nihei-san from Anna. Did studying abroad here in London change your style?
Not really. I think I was pretty much like heavily influenced by Estonian animation before going to the RCA. So I kept making my films with my styles, like using the same, materials. And I was hoping to like, after going to the RCA, I was kind of trying to do like animating in a digital style, but I couldn't do it. So yeah, I just kept doing my style.
Yeah. When did you first encounter Estonian animation?
I guess when I was in the second year in my uni, or maybe first year, there was a like screening at the local cinema, like just showing Estonian animations like Palm's work, Pretender, Kasper Jansis, and bunch of Estonian animators' work were shown at the time. And also at the time, Koji Yamamura was writing about Estonian animations on his blog. So I was reading it, and yeah, that was kind of that was one of the biggest reasons.
I'm sure many listeners are familiar with Koji Yamamura, but those who aren't, he's one of the most prominent and most interesting independent animation filmmakers in Japan at the moment. I've got a question here for Wada-san from Olia. You spoke about various influences in your presentation, but not so much about your influences in animation itself. Are there any animators or animation filmmakers who have inspired you a lot?
僕がアニメーションを始めるまでは全然知らなかったんですけど、始めてからそれこそ山村浩二さんからいろんな人の、作品を教えてもらったりして、で、多分一番影響を受けたのはイゴール・コバリョフかなと思います。彼のその独特、僕がやりたい独特の空気感みたいなものが、彼の独自のその空気みたいなものがあって、それはすごくシンパシーを感じたし、こういう人がいるんだっていうすごい発見でした。
Well, before I actually started making animation, I really didn't know any other animators. But since then, I've learned about a lot of other animators through Koji Yamamura, and probably the one who has influenced me the most has been Igor Kovalyov, who creates, as I'm trying to do, creates a very unique kind of atmosphere. So that was a big discovery for me.
On that note, how do the two of you find animation? How do you watch it? Do you go to many festivals, or at the moment online festivals? Do you browse YouTube and Vimeo, or do you rely on friends and colleagues to show you things, give you recommendations? Wada-san, maybe you could answer first.
そうですね、最近は、オンラインの映画祭もたまに見ますけど、ほとんど今見てないかもしれないですね。でもこの前、アメリカの、なんだっけな、映画祭、二平さんが本編してた、
グラス
グラスですね。グラスっていう映画祭がオンラインであって、それが大山圭さんっていう作家さんと頼まれてもないのに2人で勝手に審査して勝手に自分たちの賞を発表してましたね。 それはその時にいっぱい見ました。
Recently, I've been watching some online film festivals, some occasionally, but I don't watch that much. Recently, there was a film festival in the US that Nihei-san Nihei-san's work was showing at. Was it glass? And yeah, Kaoyama and I, even though we weren't actually invited to, we did our own little judging session and awarded our own prizes. So I watched a lot of animation there.
二平さんは残念ながら賞には至らなかったですけど、評価は高かったですよ。
I'm afraid we didn't give you a prize, Nihei-san, but we did very much like your work.
Nihei-san, what about you? Where do you watch your animation?
I don't watch animation at all, except for the, like online festivals where I'm given some ticket for free. But no, I don't watch. I love watching like feature films, like live action films, like horror films.
Did you say Love Actually?
What? No, I didn't.
Oh no, sorry, I misheard. You were saying films. What sorts
horror
of
films or
horror
like
films. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. Thank you. We've got a question here from Sueyi Charlie, which is for Wada-san, but really I think it's a question that works for both of you. Where do you find your colors? In both of your films, the color palettes are quite striking. They're quite muted, and they've been like that since kind of your earliest films. So how do you find those colors, Nihei-san?
Well, I quite like Henry Dagger's works. Do you know Henry Dagger? I think he's German artist. He's not alive anymore, but I think he was his work was discovered after he died, and in his flat. After he died, someone discovered tons of works in his flat, and his colors are really shaded and how can I say, like pale, but it's beautiful. And I love his work is not the only one I'm trying to, like, I don't say mimic, but I'm trying to like find my own way to, I don't know, my own, like in between. I'm trying to find like between like Estonian animation and some other stuff I'm fascinated with. So yeah, there are a bunch of things I'm influenced.
Thank you. And Wada-san, how about you? What draws you to these colors that you use?
そうですね。もともと仏教の仏画っていう絵ですね、彫刻じゃなくて絵の方が、好きで、それはまあ年月が経ってるので色が褪せたりしてるんですけど、そういう褪せた色っていうのが好きで、だから自分の作品でもあんまりこう派手な色みたいなのは使えないというか使わないようにはしてるんですね。
I've always liked Buddhist paintings, not the sculptures, but the paintings. And they tend to be quite old, so the colors are faded a lot of the time, and I really like those faded colors. So I tried to avoid bright colors in my work.
なのでその色もそうだし、細い線とか表情とかもかなり物画からの影響は、ビジュアル的な影響はあるかなと思います。
And it's not just the colors. I think I've taken quite a lot of visual inspiration from Buddhist art, in terms of the thin lines that I use and the expressions.
ただまあ、その色がめちゃくちゃ苦手で、僕自身は。全然わからなくて、大学院の時に途中経過を教授たちに見せたら、色つけない方がいいんじゃないって言われて、それで深く傷ついたので、そこからは奥さんがデザイナーをやってるので、カラーデザインを奥さんに任せるとか一緒に考えてやっています。
I actually have a very poor sense of color. As a graduate, I showed some work in progress to my professors, and they said, maybe you should stick with black and white, which hurt me. So now my wife is a designer, and she helps me with the color design.
Thank you. Moving on, I've got a question here from, it's just jumped down. Here it is. A question from Leila for Nihei-san. She says, your story is very inspirational. How do you keep motivated during low work periods? So she might be referring to periods where you weren't yet receiving many commissions when you were back in Japan, and you were not getting many jobs at studios.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to get myself motivated. But, like whenever I read newspapers, and I always feel despair, and it's absurd things happen like on a daily basis, and that kind of despair has to be like I don't know, I've got something to do with those absurd stuff that I don't know. So I get inspired by the incidents like happening on a daily basis, that basically really dark, and like murders and things. But I'm trying to make something entertainment out of it, because it's hard to just focus on dark things. So yeah.
Yeah, so dark but entertaining. You spoke in your presentation about how some of the people who've influenced you have a kind of dark humor in their work, and I think that definitely runs through your films as well.
Yeah.
Wada-san, we have a question here from Laura, who's asking why you decided to combine animation and interactivity in my exercise. Basically, why did you decide to create a game? And on this point, I'd just like to add, I think I read an interview with your producer, Nobuaki Doi, who said that one of the motivations for creating a game was to try and find a new way to monetize your work, a new revenue stream, basically. I'm wondering whether that was the case. That was part of your thinking as well.
もともとそのプレゼンでも見せたような犬のお腹に腹筋するっていう動きがあって、それを何かこう映像にできないかなっていうのがあって、でそういうのはもともとあったんですけど、そこにその今言われた土井くんがそれをもとにショートフィルムも作りながらゲームも一方で作って、 こう両方リンクするようなものができればいいんじゃないかみたいなこう話をもらったんですね。
So you saw the idea for the game in the presentation. It's the sit-ups into the dog's stomach, and that was I already had the idea for that movement, for that motion, and I'd been thinking about how to turn that into a film. So that idea was already with me, and then Doi-san, the producer that you mentioned, approached me with the idea of making a short film and a game that were somehow connected.
なので、僕自身ゲームっていうのはもう知識としても全くないし、こうやろうっていう発想がなかったんですけど、その土井くんのアイデアで始めたし、そこで目的としては今言ったみたいにしっかり稼ごうとっていうのを目的に作ったので、ただ作るだけじゃなくて、どうやって売れるかというか、そういうのも考えながらやりましたね。
I knew nothing about games. I'd never thought of making one. So it was Doi-san's idea. And the aim, as you say, was to make some steady income. And so we were thinking not just about how to make the game, but also how to sell the game.
そんなに売れてないんですけどね。
Not that it's really sold that much.
Well, everyone out there, get on it. You can download it from the App Store. A couple of quid, definitely worth it. I spent this morning playing it, and some pretty wild stuff happens in it, I can tell you that. On this subject, actually, Wada-san, I know you've made some films with Doi-san, who is Japanese and based in Japan, but you've often received funding for your films from Europe and from overseas. And Nihei-san, you were telling us it's the same thing with you. You worked in Denmark, you've had a French producer, you made a film in the UK. What is the landscape for funding independent animated shorts like in Japan? And has it changed in the time you've been working? Maybe we could start with Nihei-san.
Yeah, I don't have, because my latest film, Polka Dot Boy, was produced by French production company, New Productions, but it was kind of last minute to sign the contract. So I don't know, I didn't have any hope when I was making Polka Dot Boy to be like produced by any production companies. And at the moment, I don't know, maybe I have some like ways, I found some ways to get my film funded, but I think it's still difficult to get the funding for independent animators, especially for short films. And so I think I'm gonna try to make a feature film next.
Wada-san, how about you?
そうですね。例えば10年とか20年前に比べたら、日本の助成金も個人ベースで応募するのもいくつか出てきたり、そういう環境というか状況としては変わってきてるのかなと思いますけど、やっぱり継続的にできるかっていうとそうでもないですし、その辺はやっぱり難しさはあるかなと思います。
I think there's more funding available now in Japan to individual animators than there was, say, 10 or 20 years ago. But it's not really sustainable. So that's where the difficulty comes in.
で、今、ちょうど作ってるというか、もうほぼ終わりかけてる新作も、さっき、ネヒさんからも出たミュープロダクションのと、 日本の土井くんのミューディアという会社との共同制作ですし、そういう国際共同制作みたいな形が、すごいありがたいことに見つかったのでできてますが、じゃあそれがその次はどうかってなるとまだわからないので、ちょっとそれは不安定なところがありますね。
I've nearly finished now working on an animation for Miu, the French production company that Nihei-san mentioned, and Doi-san's production company in Japan. And I'm grateful to have found this sort of international collaborative way of working. But I don't know what's going to happen next. So that there's a sort of instability there, because you don't know where the next money is going to come from.
Yeah, but in the meantime, we look forward to that film, which is, I believe, called Bird in the Peninsula, a short film, and Nihei-san, your feature as well. That sounds really exciting. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that. But for now, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. We've reached the time, so I'm just going to take this chance to thank you both again very much for the presentations and for this really enlightening conversation. Thank you, Sarina Nihei, Atsushi Wada, and of course, Bethan for translating Wada-san's answers. And thank you everyone for joining on Saturday afternoon. So now you can get on with your Christmas shopping. And I'll pass back to Junko. Just to wrap things up.
Thank you so much, Alex. You actually took my phrase, because I was going to say, oh, now you are off to that Christmas shopping. So you mentioned it. Anyway, it's a Christmas, of course, and I can see the Christmas trees behind that Wada-san's. Is that actually your house or design studio?
そうです。自宅です。
It's my home.
Lovely. Yeah, I was very inspired by both, a presentation, not that, works, how you created works, but kind of life. And then every independent, animators, animation creators, although their names are known to the world, but, actually having ups and downs in the life, and then still ups and downs. And then when it comes to monetary, of course, the picture doesn't seem to be gloom, that's bright, rosy. But I sincerely hope that both of you keep on doing, keep on working, keep on presenting your works in the world, because we cheer you up, and hoping that we will see you not just in the person, but your works everywhere. So thanks again for both of you, Nihei-san and then Wada-san, and then thanks Alex, who ran that conversation so smoothly, and made that discussion so interesting. Thank you very much for your input. And I apologize to everybody who put that question into the Q&A box. We didn't have a time to pick everybody's questions, but I screenshot. I will send it to Wada-san, Nihei-san, what kind of questions were asked. So they will take a look. So thank you so much. And now I would like to say once again, it's Christmas shopping time. I suppose on Saturday. I hope you enjoy a Saturday afternoon. It's not bad weather in London, so you can pop out, do whatever you like. But the last announcement I want to make is that on 7th of December, we have the last talk event, which is Tokyo and Contemporary. We invite 3 Japanese contemporary artists to come over onto the screen to talk about the inspiration from Tokyo and their works and them living in Tokyo. So it is going to be very interesting, I guarantee. So if you haven't signed up, please do so. Daria actually sort of throw that Eventbrite, the link there on the chat box. So just copy and paste it and sign up. It's 7th of December. That is our last online talk event for 2021. So I look forward to seeing you on that virtual screen. So that's all from me. Thank you so much. Have a nice afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.